Hi everyone. This is Shamitria with another episode of Over the Kitchen Table from Worshiping and Wellness with Payne Chapel AME Church. And so this time I wanted to do a series on cancer, and it's called Dear God, It's Cancer. And so we're going to have conversations about cancer and where it's leading to, some with survivors, with patients, with healthcare professionals, as I am one myself. This particular conversation is on survivorship and caregiving, particularly around childhood cancers and survivorship. And today we have Tara Smith and Q Tinsley. First of all, thank you for joining me today. I know Q, you were really young when this happened, so please fill in any parts. Tara, if you have any, like where his gap of memory is. But I just want to start off with what was your diagnosis? And when did it start and all of that, like just from the beginning? What you can remember, Q, and then Tara, you can jump in.
I mean, I can't really remember any of it. I was like super young. I got diagnosed at 18 months. And I guess you should probably ask my mom more so about my diagnosis and stuff, because like to this day, I really can't describe it to you.
Okay, that's
Right. So Q was actually diagnosed at I'm trying to do the math. It was 18 months. He was stage 4 metastatic cancer. It was extragonad yolk sac germ cell, which means that he had a dominant tumor, which was the size of a grapefruit. And it had metastasized to his liver and the dominant tumor had affixed to his renal artery, and it also sort of just the density of it dented in parts of the colon. And so all of that at 18 months. Yeah.
That's an interesting terrible twos experience, I guess.
What was very interesting is the terrible twos for us. We actually got to celebrate because Quincy's treatment plan was aggressive and rather quick. And so just to explain a little bit, the extragonadal yolk sac germ cell is, as the doctors explained to me then, if a child had to have childhood cancer, this was probably one that they would like for them to have. And it's just because they have a good success rate in curing. And so, but the treatment plan was aggressive. So as soon as we did getting the diagnosis was one thing. Quincy was sick leading up to us getting diagnosed. I don't know if that's a question or anything, but
no, you could just
leading up to getting diagnosed, Quincy was sick. He would have these periods of really throwing up, and his food would not be digested. So whatever he had eaten that day would come up whole. So that was a little concerning. And then his trunk would be really, his abdominal trunk would be really, really hot. And he wasn't gaining weight. And so we started going to see a GI doctor, and they thought, maybe it was just they were treating him as with failure to thrive. And so we realized that wasn't working, and doing the regimen to sort of gain weight wasn't working. And so the problem with identifying the tumor was because whenever they would go to examine Quincy, he would tighten up his muscle. So if he would relax the abdominal muscle, you could feel it. But because he would tighten up and tense up, you couldn't feel it. And so long story short, we had a really, really great pediatrician who trusted mom and dad and said, I trust this mom and dad. They know their baby. Something is wrong. And so we did a whole workup. And when Quincy, what got us admitted into the hospital was Quincy had a red blood count of like 6 or 8. Oh. And if you know anything medically, it should be in the teens or higher. And so he had a really low blood count. He had no platelets. He was very low on platelets, and his white blood count was out the roof. And so we got admitted. They did an ultrasound, but they couldn't visualize it on ultrasound because of the type of tumor. If your kidneys sit sort of like this, Q's kidneys were like this. And all of that extra space was tumor. And so it was really hard to visualize on ultrasound on. So we had a CAT scan, and the CAT scan identified it immediately. Initially, they thought, of course, looking at it from images, it looked like neuroblastoma. So I work in the medical field. I am non-clinical, but I do work in the medical field, and knew that neuroblastoma was, I wouldn't say a death sentence, but neuroblastoma is just a different level of cancer. And so, of course, we wouldn't realize what it was until they did the biopsy. So they had to do a wedge biopsy. I mean, once we got diagnosis that it was a tumor and had spread, things moved really quickly. So I think initially we stayed in the hospital for 14 days, I feel like. Once we got admitted and then went through the biopsy and getting diagnosed and all of that, we stayed in the hospital. And by the time we came home, they pushed to get Quincy home for Christmas, and we actually got diagnosed. We got discharged Christmas Eve, but at that point we had already started chemotherapy. And the chemotherapy was very aggressive. It was 5 days inpatient with an additional day of hydration. So we would have hydration before and recovery drugs. And then I should say we, because I wasn't the one. It was all Quincy, but it felt like me. So, yeah. They began immediately monitoring his tumor markers. And so immediately with that first round of chemotherapy, which was five days straight, the markers started going down. So the physicians, his team at Children's of Alabama, knew that they were on the right track. And so you mentioned terrible twos, because getting diagnosed in December, starting chemotherapy in December, we had chemotherapy, or Quincy had chemotherapy every 4 to 5 weeks. So by the time Quincy turned 2, really we were sort of through, I believe.
Oh, that's good.
We were through and just sort of monitoring to make sure no recurrences and stuff. Now, I'll stop right there so you can ask whatever, because it's like I can remember it like it happened yesterday. Although, as you can see, Quincy is not 18 months. So
not so little anymore.
Our story has a definitely blessed end. So
that really kind of gave me a lot of what I wanted to speak. And I know you went to Children's of Alabama, which is a big advocate for children and pediatric. And I know you are, because that's what you work for.
That's what I worked 23 years. Yeah. I was actually working while Quincy was when Quincy got diagnosed.
Okay. And that's even a good thing about having caregivers and parents and being an advocate, an advocate for your children. When you know your child, and when things are not wrong. Like, I can, just off of Q's personality, I know I could see him tensing up as a little baby because he doesn't like things bothering him. Right. But also knowing when your child is sick and how to be proactive, just in the caregiving role, period, whether that's your child, your husband, your spouse, anything like that. So I know Q, you don't remember that time of what that feel like, because that's kind of around the time, memories start to happen. Do you remember anything about anything, or does it just like a whole?
I can't lie, that whole time period is just a blur for me. I don't think I remember anything before age 4, maybe.
Before, yeah, that's when my memories start too.
So Q does have the scars probably to
oh yeah, I still have all my scars.
So how did it feel for you, you and your former spouse at that time and your family? How did that feel like for you, Tara, to experience that? I'm new, that's still you being a younger mom,
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of different thoughts went through your mind.
Young mom, I was not even 30. My first child, my only first. I was devastated. But in the same frame, I knew that there was no way possible that God would allow me to carry this child and birth this child just to take them away. And so really had to draw on it's just a whole nother level of faith, right? Because a child at that younger age has not yet reached the age of spiritual accountability. So it all rested on me. Though Quincy's father and I are not married, we divorced a while, like a long time ago. It was rough. I mean, just me being an employee at Children's of Alabama, and having relationships with physicians there, they really helped educate me on just the just the aspects. Although Quincy had a whole oncology team, the physicians that I worked around and the nurses that I worked around, they really, it was almost like their child was going through cancer, which made it a whole lot easier for me. But I will say this, I do remember one of Quincy's doctors, because, and I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I remember one of Quincy's doctors when he would be in the hospital. I was so tuned in to like his alpha fetoprotein levels and all of that, because I learned through the course that those were his tumor markers. So whenever they would draw labs, I would be on trying to get the numbers and all that. And I remember one of his doctors coming in, and I mean, I was on it, like I had my whole list of this is up, this is down, this is up. And so he just looked at me and said, "Mom, this is what I need you to do. I need you to be mom. Like, don't look at any lab numbers." And he's like, "What you gonna do with them?" And so I sort of felt freed at that point. I mean, not that I wasn't caring for Quincy, because I definitely was. I stayed at the hospital 24/7, really taking care of my baby while he was in the hospital. But as a parent, I don't think anybody is. As a parent, you're not ready to hear that your child, who is barely vocal, right, has been diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic cancer. And so just though I indicated that his treatment plan was quick, so to speak, but very aggressive. We knew things like the type of, and it's so crazy because I think I could still remember some of the drugs. We knew that one of the recovery drugs that Quincy was on could have had, he could could have long lasting impact on his kidney. So we knew that he could end up having issues with his kidneys later. We knew that just in general that chemotherapy, if you know much about it, chemotherapy kills fast growing cells. And so you have fast growing cells in your ear. And so they monitored Quincy's hearing. So Quincy has some level of hearing loss. And so just learning all of that stuff, but nothing that we went through during that time would I take away and change from what the outcome we received, because the outcome was Quincy's living viable, and as healthy as any 22-year-old can be. I mean, so it was a rough time, but I do believe that with family and not that I think that children did anything different for me than they would have done for any parent. No, Children's is not a St. Jude. Children's is not, the Shriners hospitals and all that, but they really made sure that resources were available to us. And then just the department I worked in and just people that knew me and knew Quincy, knew I had a baby. They all really rallied behind us. It was just, it was, the level of support was phenomenal. And obviously the level of support we got from our family. So back then we didn't have like FaceTime and all of that. So Quincy was not, I knew that it was important to keep Quincy healthy when he was not in the hospital. And so grandparents, aunties, cousins, nobody could visit because if you know that once you monitor counts, so once your chemotherapy bottoms out your count, so you're very susceptible to secondary infections and sicknesses, and Quincy never had any. And his oncologist was like, I don't understand. How is it I'm not getting calls in the middle of the night that Quincy is in the ER? I said, because we don't visit. We don't let anybody in our home. When Quincy is done with chemo, you can call. And if he feels like talking on the phone, he can talk. But we did not allow people to visit us. We kept Quincy in a bubble. We didn't go outside around people. Now we could go outside and get some fresh air, but we did not, just because he felt good, and even because his numbers were up, because we had weekly visits. I feel like maybe 2 times a week, going to Clinic 8, the hematology clinic at Children's, getting number counts and all that kind of stuff. And so I'll pause right there because I could probably talk about this forever, like for real.
Well, you kind of touched on some of those things, like how did you cope with it during that time? Leaning on family for support, and of course your faith. And did you have, in having the resources that you have? So I'm going to kind of switch gears a little bit and kind of going towards, you said about 6 months and then it was like remission, and I'm sure it then went to like, monthly, then 3 months, then 6 months, then yearly towards remission. Okay, now we can start, I guess, adding Q into this conversation. So fast forward, I want to say probably your childhood towards, adulthood. Did you have any of those side effects? I know you and I personally have talked about those, Q, about that kind of thing, just because I'm always intrigued as a radiation therapist. But what has that been like from a medical standpoint, having a childhood cancer? Like, were you always in the hospital? Were you afraid when something happened? Like, how did that feel both physically and mentally, you know?
Yeah, so I mean, as my mom mentioned, I had some hearing loss due to the chemotherapy, and growing up I wore hearing aids, and I had a speech impediment as well. So I took like speech therapy classes at school. As far as like getting sick or like not feeling well or something happening and having to go to the doctor, I think there was and always will be some sort of fear
Mm-hmm.
behind it. But uh, honestly, man, I just try not to think about it too hard. So, you know,
And you basically, after you went into remission, you pretty much had a normal childhood, correct?
childhood, yeah, I was about to say, yeah, I had a normal childhood. I think I did pretty much everything that all the other kids did. I went to school and I took regular classes, and I was able to keep up just like everybody else. Obviously, I had to have a little bit of assistance with my hearing, and like I said, I took those speech therapy classes to help me be able to, pronunciate words and be able to say things right in conversations, and it helped a lot. I don't really too much have to do much of that anymore, and I will admit my hearing is still not the greatest. But hearing aids are expensive, so you know,
And
you
he's
kind of
lost
learn how
enough,
to
so
you
we're
kind
not
of
buying
learn
him no more.
right. I understand. You kind of learn how to read lips and make sense of what people are saying for the most part. And as far as my speech goes, if I take the time to like say things when they're difficult, I can pretty much get it. I remember a lot of the stuff that I learned in my speech classes.
Did you take the hearing aids out so you wouldn't have to hear your mama and other
Well, I
people?
didn't. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna be honest. I didn't really wear my hearing aids outside of school. I only really wore them at school, so like I didn't wear them on the weekends and stuff. My mom's pretty loud already.
So you mentioned, I'm going to jump in because
No.
there was the advocacy part. So you mentioned being an advocate for your child. And I will say that at Children's, because we knew that one of Q's chemo drugs, there was a high probability that he would lose hearing. And so he has what they call high frequency hearing loss. And so I always say the sounds that we take for granted is what Q has a hard time hearing. And so
Yeah, definitely.
it's the very high frequency sounds. I can remember immediately once we were done all along, part of his treatment plan was to get hearing tests. And so because they wanted to monitor the level of decline. And so once we were done with chemotherapy, and we knew we were not trending with a recurrency, because you go through a phase where you're in remission and then finally you're cured. They tag you as cured. And so fast forward to Quincy getting hearing aids. I can remember when he got fitted for his hearing aids and when he got his first pair. We were walking down, it was a pretty day. We were walking from Children's. I don't know why, but I decided to come out of the building. And I was holding Q. He wasn't very big, still very thin from just all the massive loss of weight and all of that. And so he had this look on his face, and he looked up at me and said, "Mommy, what is that?" And I said, I probably doubled over weeping, because for the first time in a long time, my baby could hear the birds. And it was birds. It was literally, it was just birds doing what they do. They were singing, and I could only just imagine the things that we take for granted. And so I always, when I explain Quincy's hearing loss, that is a story that resonates with me, or the moment that resonates with me. And I always say, well, it's the sounds people take for granted, the birds chirping or birds singing. And so, but to the advocacy part, Quincy indicated that he received speech therapy. I was very adamant. Now, remember, Quincy's cancer, he was diagnosed at 18 months. We went through chemo, all of that. I started working with the school system immediately. And at 4 years old, Quincy was receiving speech therapy through the school system. So before he even started school, kindergarten, we were already receiving speech therapy. And a lot of parents don't realize that those services are free to you. So we would go two or 3 days a week at the school around the corner from us. And Quincy would get speech therapy. But parents should know that there are tons of resources out there for your children who have some level of a disability. And I know we're getting into disabilities and all that kind of stuff, but I thought it was interesting to share that even before school started, we were already getting school. So we went into kindergarten with an IEP and having everything already lined up for Quincy to be a successful child and to have a successful school career. And so, those hearing aids, we probably, we lost a lot of hearing aids until finally I said, I ain't buying no more. If you gonna hear, you gonna hear on your own dime. You want to buy me?
Yeah, I don't know if I ever hear the birds again.
So, which led to a whole nother thing in the fact that Quincy had a true medical condition that caused him to lose his hearing, but yet our insurance, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama, did not cover hearing aids. We got grants, and we got as many grants as we could through programs at Children's Hospital until we granted out. And then that last set I paid cash money for, and I was, it was a lot, but it is what it is.
I didn't lose that pair though. Somebody stole them.
They probably thought they were getting some swanky kind of radio or something. I don't know, but
and like now they probably look like the earbuds now. So
they were very tiny. Yeah, they were very tiny. So
no, that this has really, really, really been good. One thing that came to mind is for a while, Q was the poster child for Children's Hospital for a while. Him and his mom's picture was it like the banner at Children's Hospital on the website?
At some point for a while. It was somewhere, yeah.
So it was on the website.
I don't know if it's still on there, but I remember for a very long time.
It's not on there anymore.
So as we wrap up, so like thinking about this, Q, this is 20 years since then. How does it feel to be a childhood cancer survivor? Like think about that. Not a lot of people survive cancer, period, and not a lot of people even survive childhood cancers. And the fact that you're still thriving, you attended college, you graduated from high school, you did really well, excelled, you played sports, had a normal childhood up into, and now adulthood. What does that feel like? What does that mean to you?
It's a blessing, for sure. I grew up going to a camp called Camp Smiling Eyes, a camp for kids who had had or still were going through cancer at the time. And we went every summer, and some summers you'll go back and that kids you was playing with last summer, they survived to see the next year camp. So it's definitely a blessing to know that I was able to survive and to become an adult and do all the things that children should grow up to get to do. And I really and truly wish that there was more advocacy for childhood cancer. We hear about breast cancer a lot, and but we don't really hear much about like childhood cancer, and it doesn't get the recognition that it deserves because whatever reason, I'm not really sure.
That's pretty good.
I think Quincy just stated his part of his purpose. I mean,
that's what I was sitting there thinking too.
You got a whole testimony.
Maybe.
You don't remember.
Yeah.
I do think that a lot of money is raised, but there's so much. Quincy didn't share that even as a young adult, he is still followed at children's. There's a clinic called the TLC clinic, and it's taking life on after cancer, or taking life, something like that. But it's TLC.
Taking on life clinic, yeah.
There you go. And so Quincy still attends that clinic, and it's a yearly clinic, and they really just I don't know, Quincy, talk about that, because I stopped going to the appointments because he's old enough.
Basically, we just talk. They ask me how I've been. They ask me what I've got going on in life. I'm pretty sure it's just good to see how many kids grow up to live successful lives despite everything that they've been through at such a young age. They always provide me with resources. They actually give out scholarships for kids who want to go to college and whatnot, depending on what your diagnosis was. Unfortunately for me, I have such a rare form. There aren't many scholarships for that, but like leukemia and brain cancer and stuff like that. So for a lot of kids, that is something that once they age out of going to the clinic and they don't have to necessarily be monitored anymore, that they should take advantage of. Now, unfortunately for me, I'm adulting these days, and I had to push my last appointment off, but I am going to try and get to it when I can. But yeah, it's not much. It's nothing too crazy.
And this made me think, for you, it's even, you have a little bit of a slight different outlook on life than most of your peers, where, even when I was in my 20s, I actually had a different mindset. Let me take myself out of the equation. But you have that thought process that you're invincible, whereas you kind of still have a little bit of, I still need to take part of charge of my health, because, I have this past history of cancer. So, which is very atypical for 20 somethings. I've seen it. Not me personally, but like other people around me, you just feel like, well, I did still feel like I was invincible, but you feel like you're invincible, right. But you kind of know that there's something lurking in the background,
Yeah. And as my mom mentioned earlier on in the interview, there was a chance that I was gonna have kidney issues, and I actually have been diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease, and I have high blood pressure as well. So I'm supposed to take medicine. Haven't been to the doctor to see them either. But I'm supposed to take medicine, but I mean, I still monitor my my blood pressure at home. I pretty much just watch what I like, eat or drink. I wouldn't say that I think I'm invincible from time to time, of course, because of said reasons. But I do like to have my fun too. I just have to be careful and mindful when I have my fun, and make sure that I'm taking care of myself on the back end.
That's important. That's a word for everybody, adults too, because
It's all about
Right.
balance.
yeah. So, as for you, Tara, how does it feel? What resonates in your spirit when you know that you are the mother of a childhood cancer survivor? How does that feel?
As Quincy indicated, I too feel blessed. I feel blessed that my story of parenting or raising a child through childhood cancer um, has the ending that it had, which is my child survived. I do recognize that there are many parents who do not sit on this side of the diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that for me, though, it was hearing it. I can remember telling my boss at the time, I think that I would be okay with it if I could just get my heart to stop hurting.
Mm-hmm.
I was heartbroken, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, because in the beginning I didn't know what it was going to be, and so once I once I found the strength um, in the Lord to fight, because right, I'm fighting. Um, I felt like I could breathe, like I literally, felt like I could breathe. So as the mother of a child who survived childhood cancer, I feel totally blessed. Because I recognize that our story is not, our ending is not what a lot of families see. And just hearing tonight, Quincy talk about, yes, we went to Camp Smile a Mile and all of that. It never really dawned on me that
Mm-hmm.
some of the friends he made the year before aren't there anymore because they passed on. And so I am always willing to share our story, um, to pray with a parent or a family, to encourage them that the days aren't always dark. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, no matter what the diagnosis is, live every day with your baby, with your child, as if it's your last, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you just don't know. And so that's why it's important to seize every moment, seize every opportunity that we can in life. And that's just good advice for us all, but especially for a parent dealing with childhood cancer. We were just immensely blessed that to have a pediatrician who said, this mom says something is wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
She called us from her home, from her house in the evenings, on the weekends. Hey, I'm just checking in. There were weird things we dealt with, like petechiae. One day she called me and I was like, yeah, we got these little spots. I didn't even think about them. And she said, wait a minute, like, can you explain them to me? And so I explained them. She said, you need to call the doctors immediately because it sounds like he has, I think they called it petechiae. And really what it meant was, it's Quincy's um, platelets were so low. She was like, literally, if he had fell and bumped his head, he would have bled to death.
Mm-hmm.
So just having healthcare providers that really, we were just blessed to having healthcare providers that really, really, took care of us and made sure that we were educated and understood. And yeah, just knowing that God never leaves us nor forsakes us,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so we had people to come and they put scriptures all over Quincy's room. And so it was just, it was, I hate to say it, it was a very humbling experience.
Mm-hmm.
But just being blessed to be on the other side and getting to see my baby grow up. When Quincy went to the prom, we did the prom send off and all of that. And my mom, my mom was here, and I was off to myself, and I was literally like sobbing. And my mom was like, "What is going on?" And I said, "Mom, this day is a day that I prayed for." In those moments, I prayed and said, "God, just let me be here to raise my baby." And to know that He honored that simple prayer, and that I was able to, that my child was still here and was able to go to the prom, and just be able to be a normal child, absent of losing those hearing aids.
Losing other stuff.
Can't hear, but I'm here.
Was an absolute blessing. So to any family that may listen to this episode, who may be challenged in this area, or just even if you are dealing with a loved one, it's caregiving is a very difficult role. But it in our weakness, God is made strong. And so we know that, your faith will carry you through. It literally will carry you through.
That's actually what I was going to ask. Any advice? That was perfect. What about you, Q, to any children that may be going through this, or, teenagers, or, who are having those routine appointments, or now adults, all of that? From your experience, any advice or thoughts you want to give them?
And just don't stop living. Just everything that you want to do in life, anything that you want to do in life, just go for it. You got a second chance at life, really, so you might as well just take advantage of it to the fullest.
And I just thought about
I
that.
always remain humble.
I actually thought about that. Maybe that's why God gave Q cancer and went through that experience at such a young age, before his memories came open, so he could live his life to the fullest.
That's true. He's intentional.
He's very intentional. So
I don't think I ever questioned why. I just needed my heart to stop hurting. So he was chosen, and I knew that
you were chosen for it. Both of y'all were chosen.
Yeah.
Okay, this has been wonderful. I will wrap this up. Thank you for joining us, Q and Tara, on Dear God, It's Cancer. Hopefully this will be a blessing to someone listening and watching this video. Thank you. Bye.